So the title of this presentation is Teaching Ethnic Studies in High Schools. And so I've been a professor of ethnic studies at Sacramento State University for a number of years. But prior to that, I was with the Ethnic Studies Department at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. And so I've worked with high schools in both states, both cities. And so this is kind of a little more information, but also kind of some of our challenges and hopefully lessons learned in doing this. So one thing for Hawaii, ethnic studies, we started things there in about 2004, 2005, and this is the area of the windward side of the island of Oahu. And Waimanalo, as you see, is Hawaiian homestead land comparable to Native American reservations. You can tell it's a beautiful beach on that side of the island. And the primary high school is Kailua High School that we work with. So I was working with the Asian Pacific Islander Youth Violence Prevention Center that was funded by CDC in response to the shootings and killings at Columbine High School in Colorado. And so we worked with 3 different neighborhoods on the island of Oahu: Kalihi, Waipahu, and Kailua. And it worked out then that Kailua town and then the high school is a community that we work with. And so we started it in 2005, and there'll be a little bit more description later on. But by 2012, for a high school that had huge conflicts and tensions between the Native Hawaiian students and non-Hawaiian students, ethnic studies wasn't the only reason, but this is one of the byproducts of it, is help to transform the school and that community. And to the point that where they had to bring in the tax squad before, that by 2012, it became known as a high school of peace and of compassion and love. And therefore the Dalai Lama came to visit Kailua High School in 2012. What happened was the course that started in 2005 was an actor school class of 14 students, and then it became so successful in terms of improving intra-group identity and intergroup relations and identities that changed the school climate. And so we had then the implementation of ethnic studies, and here you have one of the products of it. And this is at Kailua High School. And so in a newspaper article written at that time on April 24, 2012, at Kailua High, ethnic studies began in 2005 as an after-school elective program with the goal of increasing understanding of both your own ethnic group and groups and other ethnic groups. The following year, Principal Honda, who is still the principal there today, declared ethnic studies as a graduation requirement for all students, making Kailua High School the first school in the United States with such a mandate. Now, since then, at Kailua High School and other high schools, not only did it change the school climate, but we noticed it improved attendance, retention, graduation rates, testing. And it simply, students felt more in tune, more interested in their classwork because of this class that they could relate to, or series of classes, depending on the school. And continuation of that newspaper article, community partner tells the story of a Kailua High School student who would walk into a classroom slouching, announce he didn't give a beep about this class or anybody, and who may or may not have just dabbled in various substances. Through his introduction to ethnic studies, his attitude and behavior changed, as did his grades and his life for the better. And so in Sacramento, we had started in 2002 a project called the 65th Street Corridor Community Collaborative Project. And initially it started at Hiram Johnson High School with a 9th grade ethnic studies course in 2002. And now meaning the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a movement in California for the implementation of ethnic studies into high school curriculum. So given lobbying efforts by community organizations, community folks, and other professionals, that the Sacramento Unified School District was one of the first to begin to implement ethnic studies in California. Not the very first, but one of the first. And so Governor Brown in October of 2016 signed off on AB 2016, which mandated that California's high schools have ethnic studies curriculum, which can be interpreted many ways. So it could be part of U.S. history or government, or it could be independent courses, specifically ethnic studies or Asian American studies courses, or a combination of both. And some districts are interpreting it that we would make it a requirement, we would make it optional, and so it's being interpreted in many different ways. But nevertheless, the schedule for implementation is now 2019. And so the dilemma of people involved in ethnic studies is, how do you train thousands of high school teachers in the state of California? And how do you train them so that they have a deeper appreciation and understanding of what ethnic studies is about? And so I want to give you a little bit more insights into that. And that's with this textbook here. That's the second edition that's coming out next week. It's called Our Stories and Our Voices. And you could see behind, it's not the White House, looks a little bit, it's Sacramento, the state capitol building. On the left, Our History, Our Way, which is the slogan of the University of Hawaii Manoa Ethnic Studies Department. Third World College is, the demands were for Third World College. Third World Liberation Front was the coalition of groups in 68 and 69. And ethnic studies now is one of the groups in California, and there's chapters throughout California of lobbying and pushing for the implementation of ethnic studies. And what I have in front of me is the first edition of Our Stories and Our Voices. And we had done an earlier one that was called Introduction to Ethnic Studies. We kind of talked to different high school students, and they said to us, you need to change the title. You need to have more photographs. You need to make it more relevant to high school students. And second edition and this new third edition are movements towards that. And so this gives you an idea. This is the table of contents here. And you notice we're going out, Are You With Us? The Origins of Asian American Studies is essentially the lead article, giving the high school students that historical context. And then Unit 1, Inventing Images Representing Otherness. And if you look at it, and besides kind of looking at different racial and ethnic groups in California and different issues, both historical and contemporary, that there are 8 Asian American Pacific Islander related articles. And some of them, for example, chapter 14, a story of the people, the Hmong and CIA secret war in Laos during the Vietnam conflict by Chao Bang. Another one, Yi Hien, We the People by Pham Satrin. Filipino Americans, chapter 18, From Indians to Asians in America by James Sobredo. Chapter 22, Japanese Americans, Incarceration to Redress by Mas Hatano. Mas is 91 years old. In 1942, he was 13 years old when he and his family were sent to Tule Lake. And Mas is, in fact, one of several people who have spoken in my classes on the internment of Japanese Americans. And last week he spoke in my class for the last time. So he's going to be completely retired from doing this. And so it's changing in terms of how we will be teaching ethnic studies and Asian American studies too, as the transformation of the generations. Another article, chapter 23, Double Happiness, Chinese American History through the lens of family, community, and food. And I'd like to read a few paragraphs in that article. Chapter 25, The Angel Island Story, Asian Immigration, Paper Names, and Poetry of Resistance. And chapter 29, which is the new chapter, and that's Fiji and Fijians in Sacramento. And so we try to keep up to date with the changes and also with the local population. By the way, later on, I'll have chapter 2 available for people to take a look at, and I bookmark the Asian American chapters if you want to take a quick look at it. This is the only copy that I have with me. So, but there's others, and if people are interested, you can see me later on, especially for the next edition that comes out next week. So this gives you an idea a little bit of the introduction here, kind of talking about the historical background in this article. And another article in the chapter before it starts talks about gold mining in California, Auburn. And this one, I think Ted and other folks here can tell you a lot more about Tunnel 8. And the Chinese camp by Brown Station. And so I was inspired by the presentations yesterday, so my wife and I want to go to all these places. And we have a special request. And this is a photograph, not from the book, but I thought, given that this is the 150th anniversary, this is my great-grandfather, Wong Sao Siu. He was also known as Wong Jim Wong. And so he was probably given this more westernized, anglicized name, Wong Jim Sing. And so in going through records, the railroad records, and my wife and I went to the Railroad Museum last Saturday, partly to get inspired for this presentation. It's important that we have the full names, and it's very clear in looking at all the records. And most likely he was known as Jim Sing, and he later became a Chinese contractor, or the China boss man. And although he was in California and born in 1844 and came in the 60s, he did not return to China until 1911 with his wife and 2 of his children. And one of his children is my grandfather. And the purpose of the trip was to arrange a marriage for him, and was arranged, and so he met and married my grandmother in Hong Kong. And we have another chapter on Angel Island. Here's part of the interrogation. The cooks in the in Angel Island. This isn't a restaurant, this is Angel Island. And this is something that's very precious. And this is from one of our chapters, a coaching book, rare surviving example of the Chinese exclusion era coaching book by, and this is a collection from Yellow Visions. And this is a photograph of Yi Guanhua. And he fought a court case in Oakland, California. And this is Violet Steinreel, part of the Double Happiness chapter. And we found that Chinese restaurants played a very key role in terms of being gathering places for the Chinese community, be it in Chinatown like San Francisco or Oakland, or some of the suburbs in the 1950s here in El Cerrito, California. And so I like to just read kind of the last paragraph in closing. One of the most important people in my life was my grandmother, Violet Wong. In 1982, she passed away at the age of 87. She was the first Asian American actress and a pioneer in the Chinese American culinary world, but for me, she was grandma. One night I went to visit her as I was preparing to return to Hawaii, and I walked in her bedroom and she was semi-conscious. She asked me, "Ne yak jaw," which literally means, have you eaten yet? But the phrase really means, "Are you well?" A few hours later, Grandma passed away. Whenever I think of my grandmother's family, community togetherness, and sharing, food comes to the forefront. And yes, Grandma, as you have taught me, I continue to eat well and be well. And so I just have a few comments from teachers that shows up here. No? Okay, there it is. And this is implementation of teaching ethnic studies in the high school. And do you mind reading this for those in the back? And this is the last one.
Dear Dr. Mark,
Okay.
what an honor to hear from a true American hero. Thank you for sharing your inspiring story with us. Best. Trina? Dr. Mark, as I have written in your card, I truly hope that we honor your legacy. You set the bar high. Dr. Mark, once again, thank you for your support in my journey in becoming an educator. I feel like I cannot thank you enough. I was elated to find out that you were going to be a part of this professional development. It was great connecting with you. Thanks again, Sal.
And so, teacher training is challenging, but it can work. And these are just some open-ended comments from last year's training, just to give you an idea what some of the people who are now assigned to teach ethnic studies in some of the high schools in Sacramento. So thank you very much.
Thank you.